What is going on, everybody? Chris Fluke here, Chris Fluke Podcast. We got another big-time book review here, man. We got hammered. I'm up here in Pennsylvania. We got hammered with snow this week, man, like 30 inches roughly. Right now at this moment in time, we got some more winter weather coming down. And as I was thinking, as I'm coming to work this morning, which, like I previously discussed, my work now, we have a wonderful, beautiful horse farm, roughly 10 acres. We got this barn here from the 1800s. I moved my business home here. It's been a work in progress. My thought process was this: hey, we got terrible weather. All I have to do is walk 50 yards from house to gym, and I should be good to go. But I almost went down about 3 times today. I thought my winter shoes here would have done a little bit of a better job, but it is a mess out there, man. And I can't believe how much snow we got. It's been like 5 or 6 years since we got hammered with winter weather like this. Right now it's sleeting, hailing, whatever the heck's going on. We're setting up for another miserable morning here. But anyhow, back to the point of this video here. So last episode we covered Lean Made Simple, which was a pretty cool book. I started doing the program now. At the time that I talked about it, I wasn't diving into it yet. I'm diving into it now for the month of February here, and so far so good here. My abs from doing the ab wheels, man, torn up. Sore for days. My Monday workout of ab wheels, I was feeling it Friday. I couldn't, I got no range of motion on it. It's nutty. But if you want some more of that Lean Made Simple stuff, I'm going to be recording these videos coming out hopefully starting on Monday, which I don't even know what the date's going to be on that day, but the second Monday in February, we'll say here. Just come to the Instagram page, go to YouTube here. Hopefully we got the whole month laid out with workouts, all right? So at the end of that podcast, I talked about doing Apollo's Arrow, which was a book by Nicholas Christakis. Great Greek name right there. And basically I decided that, I'm hammering through these book notes, and I'm taking a bunch of notes, and I'm thinking to myself, this is not really my lane. I'm talking about the history of plagues, stuff from, BC, stuff from the, 900 era, and then we're talking about some of these more scientific things here about the spread of viruses and things of that nature. And I'm just like, I'm going to press pause on this. This is not my lane. But what is my lane? Reading about the history of fitness, and then hopefully applying it to everybody that I work in. So, there's that old saying that's like, as you get more experience here, for every book you read, you just hope to get 1 or 2 things out of it. But every time I pick up a book by some guys like I mentioned last week, Dan, John, Mike Boyle here, it's just an endless amount of notes here. And I've got note after note after note, 6, 7 pages here of notes. And I'm like, Jesus, is this ever going to stop? I read a book, just write down a bunch of stuff. There's obviously great people out there. And it's like I need to learn it, relearn it over the course of years here because I forget everything that I learned. So today we're going Mike Boyle's new Functional Training in Sport. Now back in the day, I read his books like 10 years ago, let's say. I'm training people at LA Fitness. I'm coaching football, and I'm like, I need to figure out a way to kind of train athletes here. So I pick up a few books, and some of them are Mike Boyle's, right? So I pick up Functional Training for Sport, the original, the OG book, and I start getting into that, and it really opened my eyes to a few things here, how to train athletes. One of which was, for all the athletes and all the people that I work with, for all of you that complain about why are we doing front squats, Mike Boyle was the originator of this thought. The front squat came from him. He wasn't doing heavy back squats. He was concerned about the spinal loading. Fast forward 10 years, the front squat's primarily out of his program now because, again, he's worried about these bilateral exercises and whether or not there's a great transition in the sport. I just had a talk with a parent yesterday, and we're seeing, a local athlete here doing an exercise, a bilateral squat with heavy load with questionable technique, and it's just thinking, where's this? When do we stop? When is enough enough? And they talk about it a little bit here. When is there that point of diminishing returns? It's like, hey, I have a female that could do 225 back squat for 2 as a senior in high school. That's pretty good. To go from 225 to 275 for 2, is that the time and the effort that's going to take to get to that point? Is it really going to make them a better athlete on the field? This is the law of diminishing returns. We get to good enough. Once we get to good enough here, I might start leveling off with my progress here. So to spend 30, 40, 50 minutes trying to drive that number up a little bit higher, is there going to be carryover to the field? Mike Boyle's whole career, his whole concern is carry over to the field. He wants to produce great athletes that weightlift, not weightlifters that are athletes, if that makes sense. Let's get everybody doing good enough. Let's get everybody to a certain level. And then from there, we could focus on excelling at the sport, right? Which is not his wheelhouse. He's a gym guy. He's not helping them be great lacrosse players or hockey players. He wants to get everybody to a certain level, get them doing challenging exercises, getting them and by challenging, I don't mean stand on one leg. His book says functional training for sport. It's not the functional exercise that you think that you might see with the Bosu balls, standing on one leg on the stability ball while practicing your golf swing. I remember a guy doing that back in the day. LA Fitness, of course. You stand on a stability ball and he's like, oh, yeah. As he's trying to practice his golf swing, man. Is he really? I don't know, man. I'll leave it at that. That's not the functional training that we're talking about here. It's not the functional training that most strength coaches believe in. It's not the functional training that I believe in. So, for Mike Boyle here, the genesis of some of this thought process came from let's just say somebody gets hurt. The exercises that the physical therapists were using to get that athlete back to play or back to training, he's like, maybe there's something here. Maybe these might be good exercises to incorporate into our programming to maintain and improve our long-term health here. So, it really got him thinking. He introduced me to this quote, what if the way we have always done it is wrong? So as he's starting to get more experience in the field, he's starting to see things, he's starting to apply some of these concepts to his athletes, and he's starting to look around like, wait a second here, maybe we don't need to do heavy back squats. Maybe we don't need to do some of these things. It's like, maybe the way that we've been doing this is wrong, and start to take a look, eliminate yourself from the equation, kind of look at it from an overhead position. Like my boy Jocko says, you kind of, you disengage a little bit here and you start viewing it from the outside, and you might be able to make some changes to your approach here. And that's kind of what Mike Boyle did, all right? Other stuff like that with Boyle. Everybody wants to think outside the box. With this program, it's nothing earth-shattering, nothing super creative. And, he's got this saying that, before we start thinking outside the box and start doing these crazy exercises that involve, pushing a tire and pulling it with ropes and doing all kinds of crazy funky stuff, he's like, let's become a master of the box, which is these functional, fundamental lifts. And then from there, if you want to get wild and crazy, you could do it. He's not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But let's master the box first before we start thinking outside of the box, all right? So in Mike's mind, he was comfortable with where he was, but he just saw that quote from Lee Cockrell that went in a book, Creating Magic by Lee Cockrell. What if the way we've always done it is wrong? Once he mastered the fundamentals, then he started deciding, hey, maybe we could expand this a little bit here, and let's start dabbling with some new stuff, applying it to who we're working with, and try to go from there. So, master the box, and he hammers it home with a quote by the great coach John Wood, and it basically goes something like this. Most people spend too much time learning the tricks of the trade that they don't learn the trade itself. So it's like, let's get in the trenches here. Let's try to hammer the basics. Let's try to get everybody to a certain point here, before we start trying to learn different tricks, from the Soviets or from this, that, or the other thing. So now, like I already mentioned here, I've read Mike Boyle for about 10 years, big fan of him, went to a conference in February right before the coronavirus hit, and as I'm up there, Mike's sick. And I'm like, huh. So I jokingly, this is not even something to joke about, but I was like, hey man, first case is in Boston, I don't know if I should be going there, guys. If you don't see me on Monday, say a prayer for me, right? That was my humor at the time. So fast forward a few days, I got sick while I was in Boston. Mike Boyle's there, man, and he might be the cause of my illness, actually. He was talking about how he's not feeling well. He was just going to present, go home. He organizes this big thing. There's hundreds of people there at his facility. He's sick. I got sick then, and I'm thinking, maybe Mike is the genesis of that. Never mind the fact that I didn't sleep the previous night due to an illness with our child, and drove 5 hours, in a terrible way, and I shouldn't have even been driving, probably the way that the fatigue was there. But I went up there, I saw his facility, I saw what he was doing, and it was pretty cool. Not only was Mike there, but then the other guy that I enjoyed, Dan John, you got to listen to two guys that have been in the game for a long time, was great. So when we start looking at Mike Boyle now, a lot of the issue, and I still fight this urge to this day, is I was just putting a program together for high school football team, and I'm mixing and matching. I'm taking stuff from here, stuff from there. And at the end of the day, I finally found that, hey, somebody did do this program already. So it wasn't that my idea was unique. It already existed somewhere in this brain of mine. And I pulled from it. So what am I talking about here? There's a chef and a cook, right? You have the chef who creates recipes. You have the cook that takes what the chef created and makes it themselves, right? So a lot of us here in the beginning of our time in the strength and conditioning world, we're pretty much cooks, all right? And all we're doing here is we're grabbing from the chefs, we're grabbing from the great ones, and we're trying to create our own little recipe, right? But at the end of the day here, the great chefs, they don't combine two recipes. You don't take Jim Wendler's 5-3-1 program and, combine that with Pavel Satsulane's simple but sinister, kettlebells routine or whatever it may be. You know what I'm saying, right? We don't take the kettlebell rite of passage and try to, get the snatch test down while we're trying to do a huge powerlifting program. That's just taking two recipes, putting them together, and calling it something, right? That's not what we're doing here. So that's what the chef would do. And we have to also that's what the cook would do. The chef is creating, right? So with more experience, we could create some good, awesome things. And then one more thing to point out here. When we are creating programs, it's important to look at who we're working with, right? And not yourself, right? It's like, man, this really worked well for me. And that's fine, but that could just be an anecdotal thing, right? It could be a one-time thing. Maybe you're just some crazy man that, could roll out of bed and jump this high by doing calf raises, okay? Like could jump over 6 feet, say. But if you have some untrained kid doing calf raises and tell them you're gonna jump high, that might not be the best bet for them. They need to get certain levels of training under their belts before they could do this. I don't even know if that was a great example, but you catch my drift, right? You could be some genetically gifted person, and what you did to train might not be best for them. So you got to eliminate what worked for you and focus on what works best for them, all right? And when it comes to coaching this stuff here, you have to trust your eyes. And with the eyes comes, with experience comes the eyes. And when we our job here as coaches is not really to write these great, wonderful programs. I mean, that is the point of coaching. But the real point of it, the real key here is to watch the workouts, right? So, you could have the most simplest program in the world, but if you coach it better than anybody else, those kids are going to get incredible results, right? Or those athletes or those adults or whoever you work with are going to get incredible adults. So the focus is going to be, like I mentioned last week or last episode, my mind works in simplicity. So the simple programs coached really well is going to get some great results, right? Everybody wants the wild and crazy stuff, but that's not really for me. It's not really what this book's about. It's just not really what long-term success, I think, in athletics is about either. I think it's about keeping things simple and doing those simple things really, really, really well. Now, I had an experience last year where, I was working with a school, and a college strength and conditioning coach put the program together for these kids, but he was not able to be there all the time. Now, this coach is a great coach. If he was able to be in the weight room with these kids, he would have gotten tremendous success out of these kids. But that wasn't the situation. He created the program. He gave it to another coach, another strength coach, to implement this program. Now, this is the problem here. We have the great we have the great program, right? But this program's great for college athletes. These college athletes have, at least 4 years, probably more like 6 to 8, maybe 10 years of training under their belt, all right? They're ready for this type of advanced program. The high school kid may have 0 years under his belt, or 1, 2, 3 years, depending on who you're working with, right? So the program that's great for the 8-year training vet is not great for the 2-year training vet. They're not the same type of athlete. This person has a foundation in place. This person doesn't. So that's gripe number one. A college program is not great for a high school kid, period. Number two, the coach that was implementing the program didn't have any skin in the game, so to speak. It wasn't their program. People ask, hey, why are we doing this? The answer is like, well, I don't know, because there's a communication gap there. We don't know why we're doing 5 sets of 3 on a hang clean. We don't know why we're doing single leg squats instead of back squats. We don't know why we're doing farmer's walks out back, right? Because this coach never got word from him, from this coach on the why behind everything here. And that's a hard part too, right? Is that this coach needs to have a little bit of skin in the game in order to do it. Lastly, they just weren't given the great effort. So this guy, created this great program here, and because the coach that was implementing it didn't have skin in the game, he also didn't care as much, and he wasn't correcting as much, and he wasn't pointing out ways to improve because he's like, I don't know. It's not really my program here. I don't know what's going on. So if we backtrack to this, we need to write simple programs but coach them really well. In that situation I just mentioned, good program, no coaching. That's a problem. These kids need to be coached, no matter what the story is. And also, at the end of the day here too, we get to this point with that like if I'm working with high school kids, there's a huge, like Charlie Francis, the great track and field coach, he talked about this training window at the ages of 13 to 17. And basically what there must be sufficient power-related training during athletes in the early years, 13 to 17, to maintain the genetically determined level of white muscle fiber. And what that white muscle fiber is the fast twitch fiber. Mike Boyle said years ago, that if you want to make your kid unathletic, have them run cross country at this age, because it's going to morph those powerful muscle fibers into some more slow twitch muscle fibers, all right? And you're going to lose that power component. And if you're playing in a power sport, endurance training, long steady state conditioning might not be the best for you, okay? So now we're looking at that 13 to 17 training window. These kids that we're working with here, this is a huge this is a huge area where if we miss it, if we miss this gap, if we miss this window, it's going to have long-term effects. So, we got the kid, right, that is now a senior in high school that's like, hey, I want to play football. He played baseball his whole life. He walks into the gym as a senior, and our freshmen, that have been lifting for a year or two are stronger than him. And I'm like, wait a second, this kid's driving, this kid is just starting to, mature a little bit here. What the heck is going on here? This kid missed his window. Now he's 17. He's at the end of his window when age 13, 14, 15, 16, we would have kids in the gym that were putting on 35 to 50 pounds a year on some of these lifts. Their bench is jumping 25 to 40 pounds a year. Their squats going up 50 pounds a year. Their hang cleans going up, 20 pounds every year. And if you start extrapolating this out over 4 years, their 45 pound hang clean as a freshman is now 225 as a senior, and they're moving it with ease. It's these slow incremental improvements that got them there, and taking advantage of that, pubescent period is huge. So if we're not, and the long-term effects of all this is this, if we're able to develop high levels of strength and improvement at that 13 to 17 window, that stuff carries over into adulthood. People wonder sometimes, they see a 30-some-year-old dude doing certain exercises, and it's like, well, that 30-year-old guy's been training since he was 13, and he put in the work as a young kid with good coaching. Then now at his age, those strength levels maintain there because he's got those muscle fibers. He's got those muscle fibers developed in a way that others don't. So if you miss that window, and if you're that 17-year-old, now you're starting a little bit behind, right, than that 13-year-old. And honestly, I think long-term it does matter, because it's like, you want as many years in the game as possible, and the more years you have in the game, the less possibility of seeing a huge dip. This is a terrible way to think about things here, because if you're that 40-year-old, this could be discouraging for a 40-year-old in the sense that it's like, well, I didn't train when I was a kid. Now what? Well, you got to start somewhere. Now, instead of your training year 0 starts at 40, not 13. Obviously, that stinks that you missed that window at 13, but you still have to start, and you can still see great improvements. So anyway, I feel like I was on a little bit of a rambling rant there. Long story short here, we have an opportunity here as a coach, as a strength and conditioning coach that works with high school kids and works in the schools, that we need to encourage physical fitness in those 13 to 17-year-old range, because we need those powerful muscle fibers to develop at that age. Because as we get older here, guys, boys and girls, anybody that's listening, your strength levels are going to decrease about 1%, right? But during that same time period, your power decreases at 1.5 times that. So if you think about this, for every 10-pound decrease you see in strength, you're going to see a 15-pound decrease in power. That's a huge percentage. And you see those slow-moving adults, right? You see that person that can't move as well and they can't fire their muscles as quickly as possible. It's because that power is starting to diminish. So if we could develop power at a young age here, we're going to have long-term health. We're going to have long-term positive, healthy ramifications, all right? So rant over on that subject, all right? We want to develop strength, develop power at a young age, because as we get older, that stuff's going to decrease, right? So it's like if we get ourselves to be a strong, powerful man at 30, at 40, I'm going to come down a little bit. 50, I'm going to come down a little bit, but I'm still going to be higher than those that get into the game later. All right, you with me? Are you with me on that? Now, let's get back to Mike Boyle, right? Joint by joint approach. He introduced me to this a long time ago. So with this joint by joint approach, we got to start looking at things here, right? We got to look at the body as one piece, right? We're not training at Frankenstein. You know, we're not putting Frankenstein together here and doing body movements. We're not training muscles, we're training movements. All right, we're not doing bicep curls, we're hammering chin-ups. All right, you know, we're not doing flies on the pec deck, we're hitting heavy bench presses, okay? And we're doing medicine ball throws to develop the upper body. Lower body, same stuff. We're not doing leg extensions and leg curls. We're doing heavy split squats. We're doing some RDLs. We might be doing a little bit of hex bar deadlifting. That's the type of stuff we're doing. We're training movements. We're not training muscle groups, all right? So with this here, if we take a look at the joint by joint approach here, we're going to work our way up from the ground up, right? We have the ankle. The ankle's designed to be a mobile joint, okay? So there should be mobility in that ankle. Really high shoes, taping of the ankles, putting braces on, restrict mobility. In theory, if the ankle's not as mobile as it should be, the next joint up might have to bear some of that, okay? So our knee, which is a joint of stability, it should be stable, now has to take on some of the muscle action, some of the joint action of the ankle. So if the ankle is not mobile, not only does the knee have to stabilize, which is its main role, it's also going to have to take on the role of the ankle and be a little bit more mobile and take up some of the work that the ankle can't do. That's more stress on the knee, which could equal more knee pain. All right, and now that knee that's supposed to be stable, all right, is doing more work. All right, so let's work our way up to the hips. Right, the hip is supposed to be mobile. If our hips aren't mobile, we might have an issue going down the chain, might have some knee pain, okay? We also might have some issues going up the chain, going to that lumbar spine, that low back. So if our hips are tight, we might have some lumbar spine issues. That's a joint that's supposed to be stable, and now it's being more mobile than it needs to and bearing more of the rotational work because our hips are tight. Does that make sense? Tight hips is going to put more stress on our lumbar spine, and our lumbar spine that's supposed to be stable is now is doing more work than it needs to, and because of that is going to be a little bit achy. All right, now moving up the chain, thoracic spine. Think about this in this chest area, okay? If our lumbar spine is not stable, our thoracic spine that's supposed to be a mobility joint is now taking up some of the work of our lumbar spine, right? And as we work our way up the chain, you see how this thing is going. And then our shoulder joint, we'll say, is supposed to be a stable joint. We're supposed to have stability in our shoulder joint too, and if we don't have that, and then we also need to have some mobility there as well. All right, so that being said, if one of our joints has to compensate for a poorly moving joint, either up the chain or down the chain, that's where the pain might be. And it's like, you know, we have the smoke detector, and if that smoke detector is going off, say I got pain in my knee, that's our smoke detector, right? If my goal is just to put some ice on it, you know, it's like the solution of just taking the batteries out of the smoke detector. It quiets the noise, but it doesn't fix the solution. So you might be able to put some ice on the knee, you might be able to do some sort of treatment stuff for the knee, but that doesn't quiet the noise. It doesn't get to the root cause, which is a fire burning, whether upstream or downstream. So when we look at things like the ankle, I always wondered, like, when I first learned this, I was working, I remember, at Steel Fitness Premier, and I was thinking, I was sitting there on a Sunday reading this stuff when I was probably supposed to be working the floor, but instead I was researching or reading this book and or reading some other Mike Boyle stuff, and I'm going through this joint by joint approach, and then there was an athletic trainer there too. They used to work at the University of Florida, and I see him on the floor, you know, the next day or two, and I'm like, dude, what is going on here, man? You know, we're taping ankles up here, and we're restricting mobility in the ankle, and then we see the same kid's got a big knee brace on, looking for some extra support because his knee hurts, and then this, that, and the other thing hurts, and I'm like, why are we taping the ankle? That's like the taking taking the batteries out of the smoke detector. It's like, why don't we get to the root cause here? Why don't we make the ankle more mobile here so it can withhold some of this issues here? And then he went into a whole spiel about, yeah, we can tape the ankle and it does restrict mobility, but as after an hour and a half of warm-ups and moving around with this tape on, it gets loosened up anyway. And really, we're not really getting a super stable effect out of that athletic tape. It only helps a little bit. So I was like, all right, that might make sense a little bit. You still have the mobility there. You don't want to be in a cast anywhere. Think about having a cast on that ankle, right? If anybody ever had a cast, you're like, the next joint up gets achy because that next joint up is doing some of the work that it shouldn't be doing. So, ankles should be mobile, knees should be stable, hips should be mobile. This is the way we got to think here. If I got an issue, Kelly Starrett, supple leopard man, he always says look upstream or downstream. If you have pain in the knee, let's look downstream. Is it the ankle? Is it the muscle surrounding the calf? Is it the hamstring? If it's not there, let's look upstream. Let's look at the quad. Let's look at the hips. Are the hips doing the work that they should be doing? When we do some of this stuff here, a lack of flexibility seems to be a causative factor for a lot of this stuff here. And there's some interesting stuff with he cites some stuff. Basically, when we're starting to look at this, right? There's a new concept here where there's people that he cites here, and I'm trying to find the name here. Anytime that you're stretching a muscle now, there's recommendations out there that you should do it cold and not warm that muscle up, right? So each morning here, I've been trying to address certain issues that I've been having, and I'll read and I'll sit in different postures. And in my personal opinion, sitting in a posture like a yoga pose almost for 2 to 5 minutes and then switching and doing the other side while reading, I've had more benefits doing that than doing some of the tissue work, all right? I'm doing kettlebell swings, for example, my hips are feeling much looser. And I'm thinking, all right, whatever I'm doing in the morning time is working. So my recommendation would be this: if you do something for a period of time, stretch that muscle when it's cold, and you might get more tissue change over the long haul than if you warm it up and then try to stretch it, all right? But obviously ease into it, right? We don't want to just start cranking away at the hamstring if it's cold. You just get it set up in a way, plop that leg up there, hang out for a bit. Maybe we raise it up, maybe we start leaning into it a little bit more. But over time here, we could stretch the muscle more. Stretch it cold, try it out, let me know. I've had positive effects. But like we mentioned earlier, it's not what works for me, it works for everybody. And I'm interested to hear about what would work for you if you try this out. So if you're doing a lot of the foam rolling, some of the soft tissue work, and you're just not feeling like it's doing a whole lot of anything, start sitting in some different postures, okay? Look up some good stuff, Kelly Starrett, some other people, right? There's a lot of good stuff out there. Maybe even just hold 3 yoga poses that you think will help you. You got tight hips, sit in a few different poses for 2 to 5 minutes. Hang out there. You're not going to get tissue change with 30 seconds of a stretch hold. You want to spend some time there, right? 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it may be. Hang out there all day for all I care. But, if you want to get more flexible, it's got to take some time. And when we look at some injuries, a lack of flexibility is probably a causative factor of it all. So, let's get to the bottom of this. We got that joint by joint approach. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our bodies to the best of our abilities and stay loose, limber, mobile, not over mobile, right? But as mobile as possible. Mike Boyle mentions here, there's this strength and conditioning coach in the NHL here. He has a theory that it's more dangerous to be overly flexible in one muscle group than to be tight in all of them. So when we start looking at stuff here, Gray Cook, functional movement screen or system, compensations, if let's just say you're doing a bench press and one side is like this, one shoulder's up here and the other shoulder's drop down here, one side is more loose than the other. Over time, you're probably going to have pain because of that asymmetry. If you've got super loose hips but tight, but another area of tightness, this strength and conditioning coach in the NHL said that's more worrisome to him than if everybody was tight. So just keep that in mind. And, pain just never shows up. Pain, dysfunction exists because of the pain. And like I mentioned with Gray Cook here, you never want to put strength on top of dysfunction. So if you're experiencing knee pain, hip pain, muscle tightness somewhere that doesn't feel good, don't just keep hammering away and trying to put strength on top of that by performing, exercises like a squat. Get to the root cause. Take that joint by joint approach. Check out the ankle, the knee, the hips. Check out the lumbar spine. Start trying to figure out what's going on here and get to the bottom of it because of the smoke detector. Remember that. Don't just remove the batteries and take muscle, you put some muscle cream on, take some pain relief pills, anything like that. Get to the root cause of it, all right? Never put strength on top of dysfunction. Pain just never shows up. Pain is there for a reason. Use that as an indicator that something might not be right, okay? Moving on to, I do want to point out one thing, and I always had an issue with this when I was in yoga class, and he cites something here. Sarman is her last name, and I forget her first name. But basically, rotation of the lumbar spine, which is our low back, rotation of the lumbar spine is more dangerous than beneficial. And rotation of the pelvis and lower extremities to one side while the trunk remains stable or is rotated to the other side is particularly dangerous. And I always had some issues in yoga class where they would have us lay on our back, we would lift our knees up and then drop them to a side. And we got this serious twisting going on near the lumbar spine, and it always felt incredibly uncomfortable for me. And really what they're talking about here is that is the stuff that's going to create some pain here. Our lumbar spine is only supposed to rotate a certain degree, not a full like 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees. It should have the ability to be mobile and rotate, 10 to 15 degrees, but not these full big turns while we got a stable pelvis, so to speak, by laying down on the ground. So there's some things like that where it's like, just trust your instinct. For me in that yoga class, I didn't know why, but I'm like, this just doesn't feel good. I'm not going to hang out in there. And then, fast forward 5 years, you read this and you're like, okay, now I understand it. So how do we do it? We try to figure out, we try to just figure out ways to improve some certain things here. But if you're going to do that side twist, maybe you just prop your knees up on something. Don't do the full bend, because now we're getting into some crazy stuff here. And, in the beginning here, I didn't really know what was going on. But the more I learn, the more I read here, the more I realize that, it's like all of this stuff, it's like you start learning like this here, and then it gets so wide. Then once you get more experience here, the gap starts to narrow again, and you figure out ways to condense and eliminate, instead of taking 5 years to learn something about the low back, you get some experience, you keep learning, you could figure it out in a heartbeat. And that's the importance of staying on top of your studies, I guess, as you just keep learning. So now we're going to get to the good stuff, right? We got strength. So we talked about mobility. Now we're going to look at strength. Really, when it comes to strength training here, it's like, how does this make me faster? Sports about acceleration, right? We want to be able to perform moves. We want to be able to absorb force and put output of force as well at the same time. So when we think about this, it's landing from a jump in a good stable position. It's not having these wobbly knees, a wobbly core, anything like that. We want to be able to absorb force so we could put out force. And if we think about this when we're running here, when we're looking to improve speed, it's like, why do I need a strength train if I want to get faster? Let me just go to the field and do some work. When it comes to speed training, greater forces, greater ground forces that we could pump into the ground, that popping into the ground, that's what's going to make us faster. It's not moving our feet faster and faster. It's ground forces, putting force into the ground. How do we put more force in the ground? We get stronger, all right? How do we absorb more force? We do an exercise. Let's just say you're doing a goblet squat. You go down super slow. You build some absorption strength right there, some of the eccentric strength, all right? You build the eccentrics, and then bam, explode out of it. You can absorb force without having to get out there and do sprints, without having to do depth drops, without having to do crazy stuff. You could do it by getting stronger. If we get ourselves stronger in the weight room, it's going to translate to more force development on the field. And by force development, we're going to be able to pump more energy into the ground, which is going to propel us forward in a faster manner. All right. We have strength training here. I mean, we talked about this stuff. I'm breaking this down in another episode. I'm not going through it all right now. But we have the ability to get stronger with fundamental movements, pushing, pulling, single leg exercises, carry some weight around, sled marches. Mike Boyle's like, if you ask like, hey, if I have 15 minutes, the prisoner dilemma, if you're in prison, you have 15 minutes to work out, what exercise are you going to do? In his mind, he's like, I might choose a sled march. Do I agree with that? No, not really. But you lock it out and you're just marching and you're walking with some weight under load there. You could get some big time gains with that. So we're talking about absorbing force. We're talking about putting out force. Then we're going to start, once we're able to develop a certain level of strength, then we could do all the plyometric stuff, right? It's like you go to any track and field practice and you're wondering, plyometrics aren't a warm-up, period. You need a certain level of strength. You see some of these, young, I see it more predominantly with females, but it happens with males as well. They're landing, their knees are knocking together and stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh, Jesus, why are they doing this? plyometric stuff, you need a certain level of strength in order to get the maximum benefits from plyometric training. Some of these Russian Soviet techs back in the day said that you should be able to back squat 2.5 times your body weight before you even think about doing some of these plyometrics. Now think about that. One, how many people could back squat 2.5 times body weight? And then two, when you go into every high school and you see these rapid bounding, jumping over hurdles, all this other stuff, is that the best way for your kids to really be training? And are they going to stay healthy? I don't know. I'm leaning towards no. So we work on absorbing force. We work on putting out force. We work on rapidly applying this force into the ground with some hops. All right, multiple jumps in a row, some lower impact stuff. We're not doing crazy jumping off of things right now. All we're doing is about being rapid and putting some force on the ground, putting some pop into the ground. When we start developing our core, it's all about being stable in our core. It's not about mobility. When we're running, we don't want to run like this. We want to be stable and upright here, and our arms are working, all right? The less rotation here, the faster I'm going to be able to go in a straight line, okay? So we have to start thinking about developing the core, developing stability in the core, not crunches, not side bends, stuff like that. We want to be stable, different planks, ab wheels, things of that nature. That's what's going to help. It's anti-rotation exercises. It's doing a forearm plank, but lifting a leg off the ground and holding it there. And as we lift that leg up 2 inches, are my hips turning or am I staying stable? Anytime you're in a plank position and you take a limb off the ground, it becomes an anti-rotation exercise, which, like I just said, when we're running, we want to resist rotation. We want to be stable in the trunk, okay? Medicine ball stuff. So not only do we want to develop strength, we want to develop power with things like hand cleans, we want to use lighter implements and move it fast, right? It's all about force production. It's whipping medicine balls off a wall. It's doing different slams, different throws, rotating, whipping, one arm punch, or like from your hip, swing and throw it into the wall. Again, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts with exercises a little bit later. Ideal situation, off-season training 3 days a week. Get into the gym 3 days a week, right? I've got a group of high school girls right now that are coming 3 days a week. And, they're going from, one girl's a sophomore in high school. Maybe did 80 pounds on a hand clean. She just ripped 115 the other day after, 4 months of training. Totally mind-boggling to think about that. But it's that training window I talked about, that 13 to 17-year-old window. You could get incredible gains. This girl's developing high levels of strength that are going to probably last a lifetime, all right? With a little bit of effort, right? Not you can't just sit on your butt for 30 years and expect to be strong. Once it's there, once we can develop that, you're always going to be able to tap into that. Maybe not at the same level, but you're always going to be able to tap into that. 3 days a week. Was she going to, another group of girls are coming 2 days a week. They're not getting the same results. And I'm not just saying this because I got a gym and the more times you come, the more I get paid. I'm saying this because it works better if you're getting there 3 times a week. So remember now, strength training 3 times a week. Now we're going to get to the speed and conditioning component of all this stuff. And like I said, you can move your feet as fast as you want, but you'll end up being like the road runner. You go nowhere in the beginning, right? It's all about putting force in the ground. So when we're doing this stuff, we want to run and we want to put some pops in the ground. We want to run 10 yards fast, all right? Like I said, sport's about acceleration, not about speed always. So we want to have the ability to put force in the ground and accelerate out of a set stance. That's going to be the focus. We want to time 10-yard sprints, all right? And we want to get better at that. And if we're better at that, we're going to be able to accelerate faster than our opponent. And then like I talked about absorption, if I could decelerate fast with the strength that I develop in the weight room, then I could re-accelerate quicker. That's the goal, right? We want to accelerate, then sport's going to require us to decelerate, and then I have to re-accelerate and get the heck out of there, all right? So that's what we're trying to develop. And we could do that in the weight room. So, I already talked about the speed stuff, right? Ground forces go up. We use plyometrics. After we develop strength, we use plyometrics. We focus on putting force in the ground. We try to jump higher. We try to do stuff off one leg when we're doing some jumps. We try to skip for height. We try to skip for distance. We try to do all this stuff, all right? And then from there, then there's always the conditioning side of things. And it's my honest opinion that if you want to condition, use sports practice to condition. You don't want to replicate stuff like, hey, we're playing soccer. There's no way I could replicate that in the weight room. I don't have to run from exercise to exercise and do burpees in between stuff. When we're in the gym, our sport is lifting. Let's get stronger in the weight room. If you want to condition, go play your sport. If your sport's not in season, then we could start talking about things here. We could condition in a straight line. Most of the conditioning stuff, it's let's do a tempo run to start this thing off. Let's run 100 yards. Let's walk across, say, a football field. Let's run 100 yards back. Let's repeat this. Just do 8 100-yard runs. 75% speed, 80% speed, something like that. We're going to try to build a base. Over the course of a few weeks now we could shorten up the runs, get more intense, and get to that 90% speed, all right? Take shorter rest periods and repeat that work over and over again to the point where you get close to your season. Say if it is football, when you're hammering, 20 to 30-yard sprints, not the 100-yard sprints, because you're never going to do that. We're going to get really fast at the 10s, the 20s, and be able to repeat that 25, 35, 45 times, because that's what your game's going to require. So when it comes to conditioning, we build a base with tempo runs, and then from there we can start condensing down when we get closer to the season. That's one day. Second day, basically what we're doing is just look up the 300-yard shuttle, and we're going to be base our change of direction training off of those concepts. We could have a 25-yard course where basically, let's say you're going to run a 50-yard shuttle, we'll call it. Run 25 yards, touch the line, well, decelerate, run back. All right? Let's do a bunch of those. Let's build off of that. Now let's go down, back, down. That's 75 total yards, all right? Now we're going to go down, back, down, back. Now we got 200. Eventually, sorry, my math was wrong there. That was 100, all right? And you build off of that, right? So if you go down, 25 down, 25 back. Boom, boom, 100 yards, right? The goal is going to be to work up to a 300-yard course, all right? Now that's hard, all right? So you could make your course a little bit longer. You could do 100 yards, right? Run 100. Cool, you did that. Now let's run 50, let's run back 50. That second day of training is going to involve some deceleration, all right? With that, you could run some short shuttles, right? We could run a 5-10-5, which is like the pro agility shuttle that you see, NFL Combine, stuff like that. But really, in the beginning here, we're trying to develop some conditioning with a little bit of deceleration. As we get closer to the season, now we're going to add more. We're going to add a shorter course, and we're going to try to change do more change of direction stuff, okay? So let's say you're starting out here. Let's just say you did your tempo runs on Tuesday. You did 800 yards. Our goal is going to be to run for these change of direction stuff, because it requires more energy, more demands on the body to decelerate and then reaccelerate. So the more times you decelerate and accelerate, the more energy it's going to take. That being said, you need to shorten down your course, all right? So let's just say you did, I'm going to just make this simple. Let's just say you did 10 100-yard tempo runs. That's 1,000 yards, right? You just put in 1,000 yards. Your volume for your change of direction days should be about 3/4 of that, 750 yards. So how do you do 750 yards? You do 150-yard change of direction stuff 5 times, right? So let's just say you run 50 yards up, 50 yards back, 50 yards up. That's 150, right? So you take a break and then you repeat that until you reach 750. Again, because you're decelerating and having to accelerate, it takes more energy and requires more work. So let's keep that volume, your total amount of energy used on those days. Sorry, not total amount of energy. The total amount of distance run on those days, keep it to 3/4 of what you do on those other days, all right? Does that make sense? I hope you're with me on that. And then eventually we're going to be running some full shuttles. But I think right in the beginning here, 300-yard shuttles a lot to ask for. Let's get really good at doing some 150s. Take a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio if you really want to push it. I mean, that's kind of where we are with conditioning. If it takes you 35 seconds to do 50, 50, 50, you rest for 35 and then repeat. If that's too much right in the beginning, maybe you take 2-to-1 rest to work, or you get what I'm saying, 1-to-2 work to rest ratio. So if it takes you 30 seconds to do something, rest a minute, which is twice the amount, all right? When we come to stuff here, the whole point of this is to get athletes ready for sport. All right, we talked about the diminishing returns in the beginning here. Let's keep everybody healthy, number one. It's like that rule in medicine, first, do no harm. Let's make sure everybody's healthy, all right? Let's keep everybody healthy. If there's an issue, use that joint-by-joint approach or try to figure out what is going on here. Knee pain might be caused by hip or ankle issues, all right? Keep that in mind as we're working with athletes. Once we're healthy, once we take an assessment and see how this person moves, remember, it's always the eyes. The coaching is about watching, all right? It's not about writing perfect programs. We see how this athlete moves. If there's an issue, we have to fix it and address it. We don't want to put strength on top of dysfunction, a la great cook, right? After that, we're going to develop strength so we can apply more force, right? Our goal is going to be able to accelerate and to move more explosively. So we do that by adding strength in the weight room. Big bang stuff, guys. We're not spending time doing curls. We're going to be hitting some of the big bang lifts, all right? After that, we're going to try to drive up the vertical jump because we could test that, and we're going to try to get faster in the 10-yard sprint. That's the acceleration test. Those two things we're going to try to get better at, and we're going to track it. Lastly, we got strength, we got 10-yard, we got acceleration, we got vertical jump. We're going to be doing medicine ball throws. We're going to be training the core for stability, not mobility, okay? We want to be stable when we're moving so that we could apply that stability to the field. We're doing some tempo runs. We're trying to build a base, so to speak, and that base that I want to build is a little bit more intense than the 2-mile jog. Because remember, we don't want to get slower. We don't want to turn some of our muscle fibers into those slow twitch muscle fibers, because most of our sports are going to require us to be explosive. And there's a quote in this book that says, you talk to different coaches and everybody wants to explain like, yeah, but my sport's different. It's really not. There's a few qualities that kind of apply to all sports, and we could train that stuff in the gym. We could all afford to be a little bit stronger. We could all afford to be a little bit more explosive. We could all afford to jump a little bit higher, and we could all afford to be in a little bit of better sport-specific conditioning. Not general conditioning, which would be a 2-mile run. So we could do our tempo runs. We could do our change of direction stuff. We could try to get better with that, and that's going to help us become better athletes, right? We'll stay healthy. We do single leg training. Mike Boyle's huge on this bilateral deficit, right? This bilateral limb deficit, where if I could split squat 100 pounds total with one leg, right? 100 pounds on one leg, but my front squat's only 185. So if I add 100 to 100, right, that's 200. That number is higher than the 185. So I could overload one limb more than I would, say, on a bilateral squat. I didn't get into that earlier, but that's his focus in terms of injury prevention. Most of sports and athletics are on one leg. So if we want to stay healthy in sport, we have to train on one leg, all right? The only exception would be rowing, where you're driving off two legs. So you want to build some unilateral strength, because at the end, if I'm super strong and stable on one leg, as I push that leg into the ground to try to run forward, I'll be better. If I have to jump up for a header off of one leg, I know that I got that single leg strength and that stability that's going to keep me healthy. It's going to get me to that ball, and it's going to keep me healthy, right? Injuries are up. The more kids train, the more injuries are going up here, and I don't understand why. I think we need to kind of reshift our focus and our energy on keeping people healthy, keeping them out of the trainer's room and on the field. Mike Boyle, new functional training for sport. There was so much stuff in this book that I was having a hard time trying to dissect and cut it down into a 40 to 60-minute podcast. So that being said, if you have more questions here, I'm going to expand on some of this stuff. We're going to go over some of the exercises down the road here. I'm thinking this book here might end up being a 2-part podcast as we start looking into some more of the nuts and bolts here for those strength coaches that are interested in the programming side of things, all right? So, Mike Boyle, New Functional Training for Sport. Buy the book, all right? And then I will give my 2 cents on some of this stuff through my experience. You could read Mike's book. You could read about his 30, 40 years in the game. You could listen to a guy that lives on a farm here in Pennsylvania on his 2 cents on his experience with implementing some of these things, and that's what we're going to be looking at going forward here, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Mike Boyle's New Functional Training for Sport. My name's Chris Flook. More book reviews are coming. The next one, after I do the exercises with Boyle, I'm trying to read right now Easy Strength. So, greatest book that I've read, when it got me started when I was reading this Mike Boyle book. Right around the same time I picked up Easy Strength by Dan John and Pavel Tsatsouline. If you're a young coach, if you're into fitness, if you're into just becoming have a better mindset revolving fitness and health, buy Easy Strength. It's a game changer, all right? Hope you guys have a great day. Peace.